What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. And today, we're going to take a walk through River of Grass. This is a new documentary. It just premiered at the True False Film Festival. And I had an opportunity to screen the movie, and I was like, hell to the yes. And we'll get into why. But first, I would love for you to like and subscribe because I'm a blind film critic. I talk a lot about audio description and accessibility on this channel because that's the kind of stuff that I usually need. This film doesn't have it. We'll get into that in a second. But I want to run back in and put out the flaming fires of DEIs because those are frequently the programs that are also looking for accessibility, and where I would talk to people about audio description in these companies that they're abandoning. So I like to be able to have more audio. It would just be, it's nice, but anyway, River of Grass. As a film critic, I get offered the opportunity to screen a lot of films that aren't Marvel movies. That aren't, well, I mean, I got an opportunity to screen Captain America: Brave New World, but yeah, they aren't Marvel movies. They aren't the big ones in theaters that some of your clout chasing YouTube film critics will only review those movies. It's like, good luck getting those guys to review the smaller movies. They're not gonna do it. I don't care. I'm here because I love movies. I also picked this movie because I'm a Floridian, and this movie's about the Everglades. And I was like, yes. I feel like I have to. Like, I feel like I owe it somehow. Um, like I'm paying respect to the land, to the land that I'm on. Um, so, like, if there was a documentary that was tangentially about blind people, I'd be like, yes. I'd be like, I don't know why the blind documentary doesn't have audio description, but yes. Here, I'm gonna give it a pass. I get to do that every once in a while. I'm waving a magic wand where I'm like, I knew full well that a movie of this level wasn't going to have the accessibility that I needed, but I was still interested in the story of the Everglades. I was interested to see what Sasha Warsaw would do with the story, with using the words of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas for people to be educated about Marjorie Stoneman Douglas again outside of Florida, for her name to be known for something other than the thing that it's known for right now. Good Lord. We'll get into all of that. So, yeah, so I'm a member of Critics Association of Central Florida. Hopefully, hopefully I stay a member. I don't know, man. It's tough being a niche critic and then also meeting the standards set of viewership and subscriptions and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Maybe I'll probably get kicked out. No, like, we gotta kick the blind guy out. He's not making it. It's like, how many people want to listen to a blind film critic? Anyway, not everybody. I'm not going to be your only choice because I'm not going to be like, well, the cinematography. I like the way the camera swooped in. No, I'm just going to talk about a lot of other things. So, I did grow up in Florida. I was not born here, but I moved here as a baby. So where I was born doesn't matter because I don't remember it. So basically, the earliest childhood I do remember is being in Fort Myers, and I remember traveling back and forth across Alligator Alley as a kid because my mom had a friend that lived over on the other side, so I was constantly driving like through the Everglades. It was sort of like taking like a weekend trip over to like the Fort Lauderdale area and shooting across Alligator Alley. So I was constantly shooting through the Everglades. And I live in Orlando, and I get to hear all, y'all need Gatorlands, those commercials. And, I'm not that far away from a place called Lake Jessup, which is a lake that they used to dump alligators to. They used to relocate. So when alligators would sort of be in lakes that were sort of problematic because of it being a lake, where there were homes or kids or, whatever, they would take those alligators and they relocate them to a lake that used to not be used to not have homes on it. And now there are homes in Lake Jessup. And there's so many alligators in that lake. I, I laugh with my friend was showing me a clip of a stand-up comedian who was making a joke about being a Floridian and having lived in Orlando and being like, I live in the lightning capital of the world, and like a few miles from my house, there's this lake where the alligators get lifted from the air during a hurricane. It's like, it's a great joke. But yeah, there's so many quirky things like as being a Floridian. And sadly, there's also the reality that being a Floridian means something completely different in this political climate where we're, I don't know, losing funding for things and teaching our kids different things in schools. And even this film touches a lot on how people have tried to develop the Everglades, or how they continue to sort of take advantage of it. And the ecosystem that is the Everglades is, it's a very sensitive ecosystem, and we've already inserted pythons into the Everglades because people keep buying pythons as pets, and then they're like, oh, they get bigger, and then they don't know what to do with them, and they're like, oh, I'll put it in Everglades. So now we have all these pythons in the Everglades. We have to have python hunts. We have so many pythons and a python hunt that Peacock made a show called Killing It. That's how well known this thing is. This completely invasive species to the Everglades. That there's actually like a sitcom that ran for 2 seasons on Peacock that is centered around the killing of pythons in the Everglades. So, it's kind of crazy. And yeah, the Everglades is it's this pristine area. I remember Alligator Alley too. One of the things is like the lack of stops along the way, really. Like there's like a city along it, like once you get going, you get going. Just like a couple days ago, they caught like a bunch of people like street racing down Alligator Alley. Like they just arrested like 15 bikers or something like that for street racing. I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? You see like in Dexter's TV shows and stuff like that, he'll take bodies up to the Everglades. It's constantly like like it's like this weird dumping ground where people are like, well, there are alligators out there, I guess we'll be fine. And one of the things I love that Sasha talks about is how the alligator is actually, like an anchor species. I think that was the term that the guy used when he was describing sort of the ecosystem. It's really like this whole system is based around the alligator. The Everglades sort of is reliant upon the alligators and their actions and the shaping of how they shape the waters and everything like that, and the waterways, and they neutralize, because there are other things in the Everglades too, other predators like bobcats. So they're not alone, but even bobcats are like, oh, pythons, so yeah, and then there's, this film does touch it a little bit on the sugar industry in Florida is doing with the Everglades. Apparently we tried to build, and this was during Nixon's time, so I was not alive for this, and I didn't know about this story. It did not come up to me. This would be great, like Florida history stuff. Apparently we once tried to build like an airport by taking some of the land away from the Everglades, and luckily protesters shut that shit down. I was like, no. Yeah, we're just wrecking an ecosystem. Recently, the Everglades was part of the massive sort of Doge, like, I don't know, tomahawk to society of just rapid cuts. And so Everglades lost some funding because it's a national park, protected and everything, and slashing some of that. So one of our parks in Florida that lost that. She does bring up Lake Okeechobee in here too. I caught that, which is, if you look at Florida on a map, it's the lake you can see. I'm sorry for blind people, but that's the best way that I can describe it to people who are not from Florida. Look at a map, Do you see that lake? That's Lake Okeechobee. It's the most visually recognizable lake from on a map. So you just got to be a Floridian sometimes. Like, I was really intrigued. I remember sitting here and there was the film that they shot inside of Disney World, but like Disney didn't know about it that they released. I remember when that came out, and being like, and living here and being like, wait a minute, you mean I could just walk into Disney and like pretend? And if I just set it up well enough, because I've been in that park like 100 times. Worked for Disney for a little while. Like, that's another thing. Like, if you live in Florida, at some point you'll work for like Disney, maybe Universal now, because they're big enough that you could almost use that as your I worked for a theme park. It's really hard to not work for a theme park at some point. um, yeah, I was thinking you could actually film something, especially in certain areas, and I found that fascinating. And plus, you had it like when you see Sean Baker's like the Florida Project, and you think, oh, that's a cool name, and it's oh, it's well this place, so maybe it's like, well, it's like this hotel that's like turned into sort of like the projects because they're these poor. No, no, no. The Florida Project is what Walt Disney called Disney World before they developed it. So it's these little like nuances that you pick up as a Floridian while listening to things. And I'm getting somewhere. I swear to God. I know Sasha Werthel's probably watching this, going like, "What the is up with this guy?" Listen, I love your documentary. So, unfortunately, the thing is, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas brought a lot of. There's a reason why people name things after somebody. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you always have to figure out what that reason is. If there's ever a building, elementary school, high school, middle school, and anything like that that's named after somebody, it's for a reason. It's not just I donated money. I was rich. Here's some money. Sometimes it's I mean a lot to this area, to the state of Florida, and somebody has decided to honor me with this legacy. So, to a lot of people, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas is the high school of the Parkland shooting, and I think it's great for River of Grass to sort of reclaim that name and to remind people that Marjorie Stoneman Douglas was a person who did great enough advocacy for the Everglades that they actually named something after her. Does that make sense? Like, it actually sort of explains that without really talking about the tragedy of her name now being associated with Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, which I think they tore down. I think it's torn down now. I do believe that they're just gonna like start over or whatever, or at least the building that it took place in. I don't know, maybe the whole thing. I've had a couple students come out of there who were one who was there, and then one who later on was just out of that, like wasn't there but would have been type of thing. I don't know. It's like was just a year behind or something like that. Was like just young enough that they weren't quite at the high school yet. So, yeah, it's it's a Floridian documentary through and through. You have people who talk about the Everglades too, and it's not people that you would think, that like it's like Floridians, but like not the kind of Floridians that I think somebody who wasn't Floridian would assume we had down here, because there's that Florida man thing. Like, Florida man walks into a Walmart wearing only leopard skin underwear and carrying an AK. Like, yeah, I mean, true, but at the same time, some people are regular folk, and I also appreciate that Sasha doesn't populate the film with a whole bunch of people who could start up their own like Tiger King reality series who feel like they're the most extreme Florida men we could possibly find. If that makes any sense. It makes sense to Florida people, but I don't know that it makes. So, I mean, there's a TV series called It's Florida Man, yeah, we do this to ourselves a lot. You, we want to be proud, you know. We want to be like, yeah, we got all this stuff down here, but we've also got some really weird stuff that happens every once in a while. Luckily, this documentary avoids that. It sort of focuses on the beauty and the natural wonder of the Everglades. The sound design was great, even though I didn't have audio description to be able to appreciate the Everglades. One of the things is like, I've seen the Everglades, so I'm just kind of going based off of a lot of the images of just simply being a Floridian and having seen the Everglades. And also just having seen the Everglades for years when I had sight, just like on the news, like, you know, just shots of it. So, um, it's definitely a part of our history, and it's one that I think Sasha captures really well. The score, when it's used, she has little moments of score, and it feels like music that would be great to meditate to. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Um, my only complaint would be that it's too short. It's like 83 minutes, and it kind of feels like it almost breezes through. And I feel like you could sit, like a lot of Florida is just kind of sitting. You know, it's just that kind of like just getting laid back and just sitting. And it has like that pacing to it, but I have to believe there is more in here, more to the story, more that she could cover. You know, when she starts branching off and talking about Lake Okeechobee, I'm like, well, you could talk a little bit more about the area around the Everglades, you know, and things like Alligator Alley and I don't know, other threats. Obviously, this was made before there was any sort of defunding to the Everglade area that was happening, so that can't be included. Um, but I don't know, falling iguanas, that would have been fun. I know that's not quite in the ever. It might be. They're an invasive species too. So we also have iguanas in Florida, and when it gets below a certain temperature, we have an actual weather alert, like a weather advisory that is beware of falling iguanas because they go into hibernation when they're in trees and they fall out of trees onto people and onto things. And a lot of people use that time to hunt them because they're kind of mean sons of bitches otherwise. And they're invasive. They're not natural because, again, people keep bringing them here. So Florida is home to invasive species. Um, you know, feral cats are like not the number one thing that we're thinking about all the time. We're thinking about pythons and iguanas. So, yeah, it's I don't know. It felt like a documentary that sort of was like, this is what it's like in Florida. You know, this is the beauty of Florida, and that's what I liked about it because there's so many things out there that are like Florida, and we have this governor that I hate. Just putting that out there. Um, and I don't know. I feel like we're known if you're not Floridian for so many other things. And it's just nice to celebrate like beauty and natural wonder, you know, because it's hot down here. We get known when we're like getting hit by a hurricane. Like, I used to live outside of Florida for a while, and like people are like, oh, there's Disney World, there's the Daytona 500. Oh, it gets hit by hurricanes. It's like there are things that if you ask the other 49 states what's in Florida, they're like alligators, Disney, Daytona, hurricanes, swamps, you know, and I guess probably since then, maybe people remember us for the Pulse shooting, the Parkland shooting, things that I'm not super happy to be remembered about, or sports teams, depending on, you know, if you're an NFL person, you just go based off of what our sports teams are, and NBA, you know, that kind of thing. Um, but we also have some really cool shit. Like I grew up in Fort Myers with um, sort of like the winter home of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. There was like this little facility that you could tour down there. And I want to say Goodyear. It's like three homes. I remember two of the people that were down there. There were like these like three homes of like three people who ended up all being like these sort of grand historical figures. Um, and you could just go through them. And it was like, this is Edison's home, this is Ford's home. And it's just this nice thing that's down there. I mean, there's stuff like that all throughout. The Ringling Brothers Museum. You know, there are things that you can do in Florida that are just not Florida man things. Although, if you want to come down to Florida and take off your shirt and walk through a Walmart, that'd be totally on brand. But I love that Sasha Wurtzel takes some time to just kind of embrace what is natural Florida, native to Florida. She even got a Betty Osceola in here. Uh, I live in I live like next to Osceola County, and to hear that name was like, well, that's like the most Florida name. It's a tribe, but also it is like hearing that you're like, well, yes, Osceola. Anyway, yeah, this documentary lives and breathes true Floridian, and that's what I love about it. So, um, would I like for it to have audio description? Yeah, because I see this as having something of a value, especially to kids who want to learn more about like the history of the Everglades. This is something we should be showing in our schools. I know we won't. I mean, we're over here trying to figure out how to tell people the upside of slavery. We're never going to show somebody a documentary that pushes back at all on, I don't know, the sugar industry or developing the Everglades. But it should be. I mean, this is Florida history. This is like the richness of Florida history. This should be in our schools. Like River of Grass, that should be its ultimate final sort of resting place is as being sort of like a core use in Florida schools, um, just for young kids so that they can sort of learn about, you get in middle school and you're like, what? Not everybody lives during the Everglades. And if you live, but you should know about your state. You know, if you live in the Panhandle, you're not constantly thinking about the Everglades. It's a big state, man. It takes a while to drive through it. And yeah, so if you're up in Pensacola, it's like a different world, and you're like, well, the Everglades affect me deeply. It does kind of feel like, yeah, maybe not, but if you travel south, if you ever go to Miami, of course you're gonna head through that direction. So um I liked it, and thanks, Sasha, for taking the time to make a documentary about Florida that isn't that like HBO series. It's like, let's make fun of Florida. It's like, yeah, I know. I love the first episode was about like somebody who wanted to like eat their own toe. I was like, I can't do this show, man. Like, I can't. Anyway, River of Grass. Um, I it's it's a solid documentary. I do kind of like my documentaries to be almost like earth shattering sometimes. I prefer the No Other Lands. Do you know what I'm saying? I want my mind blown and rocked, but there's a beauty to this that I love. So I'm giving River of Grass an A minus. I found it a really easy watch. Of course, it's 83 minutes, so yeah, it's going to be an easy watch but also I, I think you could have hit 90. There's at least 7 minutes there. Especially considering like 83 minutes is also includes credits. So man, this was an easy breezy watch, and I, I respect the tone and everything that it had to find. I didn't tell you everything about the documentary because I want you to discover it for yourself. Discover the Everglades. Discover real Florida. Don't discover the how we represent ourselves in media to the rest of the world. I don't know, man. Uh, anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I remember diversity, equity, inclusivity are not bad words. I'll see you guys on the other side.